The dog didn't flinch when the gunfire started. He lunged forward through the smoke, past the bodies, ignoring every command screamed through static radios. Somewhere in the chaos, someone was shouting to take him down. Somewhere, a secret buried under blood and silence was unraveling. He wasn't supposed to survive. He wasn't supposed to remember. But he did. And now, he's the last living witness to a truth they would kill to keep hidden. This is not just a story about a war. It's not even just a story about loyalty. It's the story of a bond that refused to break, and a dog who chose to fight back when the world ordered him to forget. Before you find out how deep this betrayal goes, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments what part of this story shocks you the most, and where in the world are you watching from. Your voice matters here, and trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. The early autumn sun dipped low over the quiet town of Fairbanks, casting long golden shadows across the empty streets. Mae Thompson pulled her cardigan tighter around her frail shoulders as she stepped out of the courthouse, the weight of the manila envelope in her hands heavier than it should have been. The town was silent, save for the soft whisper of the wind tugging at the fallen leaves. A world muted in shades of brown and gold. Mae's fingers trembled as she slid into the driver's seat of her old Buick, the envelope resting like a brick on her lap. She sat there for a long moment, eyes unfocused, before she finally peeled the flap open. Inside was a neat bundle, her son's dog tags, a few faded photographs, and a folded flag stiff with starch. But something was missing, something she had expected, yearned for with an ache deeper than she dared admit. Where was Duke, her son's partner, the canine he had spoken of with such reverence, such love? Her heart pounded against her ribs as she sifted through the contents again, more frantic now. That's when she found it. A single, worn leather tag, a few strands of short, coarse fur still clinging to it, tied with a black string as if hastily assembled, an afterthought. A breath caught painfully in her chest. This wasn't right. Duke was supposed to come home. She clutched the leather tag against her heart, her throat burning with unshed tears. Through the blur of grief, she noticed a small, creased envelope tucked at the bottom of the bundle. Her fingers shook as she opened it, revealing a letter scrawled in her son's familiar, uneven hand. "Dear Mom," it began, the ink smudged in places. "If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it home. I'm sorry, I tried, God, I tried, but Mom, there's something I need you to do. Something I need you to promise me. Bring Duke home. He's not just a dog, he's family. He saved me more times than I can count. I owe him everything. Don't let them keep him. Promise me, Mom. Promise you'll fight for him. Bring him home." Mae pressed the letter to her chest, rocking slightly as sobs racked her body. The pain was a living thing, clawing at her from the inside out. How could she have lost both of them? No, not yet. Not completely. Her boy had asked one last thing of her, and by God, she would see it done. She would bring Duke home. She didn't know how, didn't know what forces she would have to battle, but Mae Thompson, school librarian, widow of a trucker, mother of a fallen soldier, would move heaven and earth if she had to. The town of Fairbanks receded behind her as she drove, the envelope and its painful contents tucked safely beside her. The highway stretched endlessly before her, a ribbon of asphalt winding into the unknown. She didn't see the sunset, didn't notice the chill that seeped through the cracked window. All she could see was her boy's face the last time she hugged him goodbye, and the gleam in his eyes when he talked about Duke. "He's more than a partner, Mom," he had said. "He's my brother in fur." And now, Duke was out there somewhere, alone, maybe scared, maybe hurt. It didn't matter that she was just one woman with no power and no plan. All that mattered was the promise she had made the moment she read those desperate words. She would find him. She would bring him back. Mae's mind spun with questions as she drove. Why wasn't Duke included in the return of her son's belongings? What had the army done with him? Was he alive, safe? The letter hinted at something deeper, something darker, and the knot in her stomach twisted tighter with every mile. The road signs blurred past her, and she realized with a clarity that almost frightened her that there was no turning back. She was committed now, somewhere beyond the veil of this quiet life she had clung to for so long. A battle awaited her, a battle she hadn't chosen, but one she would fight to the end, because her son had believed in loyalty, in honor, in keeping promises. And so would she. As darkness fell and the first stars pricked the sky, May whispered into the silence of her car, her voice raw and trembling. "I'm coming for you, Duke. Hold on, boy, hold on." Football was a source of great joy for her. May barely slept that night, haunted by dreams of Duke trapped in some cold, metallic cage, his golden eyes filled with confusion, waiting for a rescue that might never come. Before the first hint of dawn broke the horizon, she was already on the road again, the courthouse envelope now tucked safely into the glove compartment, as if its contents could somehow shield her from what was coming. The nearest military installation was nearly 200 miles away, a sprawling, fortified complex hidden beyond layers of checkpoint gates and camouflage netting, its name not found on any public map. She drove through the endless fields and barren stretches, her hands gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white, the rumble of her old Buick matching the hollow thrum of her heart. Arriving at the outer security gate, she was met by a stone-faced MP, who inspected her ID with mechanical indifference, his mirrored sunglasses reflecting her weary, determined face. "State your business," he barked without looking up. May's voice cracked but didn't waver. "I'm here for my son's canine, Sergeant Adam Thompson. His dog's name is Duke." "I was told wait here," the MP cut her off, disappearing into the small checkpoint booth, leaving May standing alone under the oppressive sun, the dust swirling around her boots. Minutes stretched into an eternity before a pair of officers approached. One, a grizzled older man whose crisp uniform and starched demeanor screamed bureaucracy. The other, a younger, clean-cut lieutenant whose darting eyes betrayed a barely concealed tension. The senior officer, Colonel Matthews, introduced himself with a handshake that felt like grasping a block of ice. "Mrs. Thompson, we appreciate your—" May blinked, struggling to process the words. "No longer available? He's not a piece of equipment. He's my son's top-secret operations. His capabilities are considered essential for ongoing missions vital to national security." May felt the ground shift beneath her. "You mean to tell me after everything, after my son died, you're keeping his dog like some tool?" Matthews's expression didn't change. "Canine units are property of the United States government. They are reassigned as needed." His words slammed into her with the force of a physical blow. May opened her mouth to protest further, but a subtle gesture from the younger officer caught her attention. He shifted closer under the guise of adjusting his cap, and whispered just loud enough for her to hear, "There's more to it than they're saying. Don't trust them." May's heart skipped a beat, her mind racing to make sense of his warning. Before she could respond, Matthews clapped his hands together briskly. "Escort Mrs. Thompson back to her vehicle, Lieutenant. She's trespassing beyond authorization." The young officer, whose name tag read Reynolds, falling into step beside her as she was shepherded back toward the gate. The sun blazed overhead, but May felt chilled to the bone. They reached her car in silence, until, under the cover of the idling engine's noise, Reynolds leaned in just enough to murmur, "There are files, locked files. If you want the truth about Duke, don't go through command channels. They'll bury it." "Why are you telling me this?" May rasped, her voice shaking with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. Reynolds hesitated, glancing back toward the compound where Matthew stood like a vulture in uniform. "Because I knew your son," he said quietly. "He saved my life once. I owe him. And Duke?" He trailed off, struggling to find the words. "Duke knows things he shouldn't, things they can't risk getting out." May's breath caught. She wanted to press him for more, to drag every secret from his lips. But Reynolds straightened sharply as another MP approached. "Drive away slowly. Don't look back," he said in a clipped tone, then added his breath, and then he was gone, snapping to attention as Matthews approached. May slid behind the wheel, her mind a maelstrom of confusion and dread. As she pulled out onto the cracked highway, her heart hammered in her chest, each beat thudding with the weight of new, terrifying questions. What had Adam and Duke seen? What secrets were they trying to erase? The gravel crunched under her tires, fading into the hum of asphalt as she left the military installation behind. But the feeling of being watched lingered like a second skin. The countryside blurred past her window, but she barely noticed, her thoughts spinning faster than the miles ticking by. Reynolds's warning gnawed at her. Watch the mailbox files, locked files. They were hiding something they didn't want a grieving mother to find. Her son's last request burned like a brand in her mind. Bring Duke home. May gripped the steering wheel tighter, her knuckles whitening again. She didn't know yet what darkness she had stumbled into, but she knew one thing with unshakable certainty. She would not back down. Not now. Not ever. Somewhere, Duke was waiting, and May Thompson was about to become a storm they had never anticipated. The mailbox creaked when May opened it, the rusted hinges groaning under the morning chill. Her fingers brushed against a thick manila envelope, unmarked except for a single black dot drawn near the top corner. Her breath caught in her throat as she snatched it out, scanning the empty road behind her before darting back into the house, bolting the door with trembling hands. Inside, she pulled the blind shut, her heart hammering against her ribs, then carefully slid the documents free. It was a dossier thicker than she expected, filled with dense printouts and grainy black and white photos clipped together by a rusty binder. On the top page, typed in stark capital letters, Thompson, Adam deceased. Deceased. The words hit her like a punch to the gut. According to this file, Duke had died the same day as Adam, in the same location at the same time. Official cause. May gripped the edge of the kitchen counter, the room spinning around her. It didn't make sense. Adam's letter had made it clear Duke was alive. He had begged her to bring Duke home. Why would he lie? Why would they fake Duke's death? Her fingers flipped frantically through the rest of the file, scanning for something, anything that could explain the pit of dread coiling tighter inside her. Tucked between the reports was a small, battered flash drive. No label, no instructions, only a hastily scribbled note in the same shaky handwriting she now recognized as Reynolds. Trust your eyes, not their words. May's hands shook as she plugged the flash drive into her ancient laptop, its battered casing whining with the effort of booting up. A single video file blinked onto the screen. She clicked play, holding her breath as the grainy footage stuttered to life. The timestamp in the corner read the date of Adam's death. The image was chaotic sand and smoke and bodies moving in frantic, desperate patterns. Soldiers shouting commands over the static crackle of gunfire. May's heart ached as she spotted Adam's familiar frame, moving with calm precision through the chaos. Then the explosion was bright and deafening, even through the screen, and her son fell, his body crumpling into the dirt. May clamped a hand over her mouth to muffle the sob that ripped from her throat. But through her tears she saw it. Duke, charging through the smoke, his massive form lunging toward Adam's still body. Ignoring the bullets whizzing past him, the dog nudged at Adam frantically, whining, pawing, refusing to leave his side. Then something else. A group of men, faces hidden under tactical masks, storming onto the field. They weren't wearing the standard-issue uniforms May recognized. They were different. Black gear, no insignias. She watched, frozen in horror, as they seized Duke, dragging the struggling dog away from Adam's lifeless body. Duke fought with every ounce of his strength, snapping and twisting, but the men forced a heavy black bag over his head, muffling his snap. In the last seconds of the footage, one of the masked figures turned toward the camera, as if realizing they were being recorded. Falca slowly relaxed her muscle pads, and the laptop screen still flickering in front of her. The bile rose in her throat, thick and bitter. They had lied about everything. Duke hadn't died that day. They had stolen him, tearing him away from the only person he trusted in the world, hiding him away for reasons she could only begin to guess at. Rage and grief boiled together inside her chest, a volatile cocktail that left her trembling with fury. How dare they? How dare they dishonor her son's memory like this? She thought of Reynolds's words again, watched the mailbox and realized this was only the beginning. Someone inside was trying to help her, but there were others, powerful others who would do everything in their power to bury the truth. May pressed her palms against the cool surface of the table, forcing herself to breathe through the rising panic. She couldn't afford to fall apart. Not now, not when Duke was still out there, somewhere, alive but lost, maybe suffering, a pawn in a game far bigger than she understood. The camera footage had opened a door she couldn't close. She needed answers. And there was only one place she could think of where she might find them. May reached for her coat, the flash drive tucked safely into her pocket, her mind already racing ahead to the next step. She would find out who those men were. She would uncover why they needed Duke so badly that they would fake his death, cover up an abduction and lie to a grieving mother's face. She would find the truth, no matter how deep they had buried it. As May locked her front door behind her, a black SUV rolled slowly down the street, windows tinted too dark to see inside. It paused at the end of her driveway for a heartbeat too long before pulling away into the misty morning air. May's blood ran cold. She wasn't just searching for Duke anymore. Someone was watching her, and if they knew she had that footage, it wouldn't be long before they came for her too. Tightening her grip on her purse, May turned toward her car, her steps steady despite the terror gnawing at her gut. She had no choice now. She had to move first, before it was too late. May didn't sleep that night, nor the next. The footage haunted her, the sight of Duke's desperate struggle seared into her mind. Replaying behind her closed eyes, every breath she took was laced with rage and sorrow, but also with an ironclad resolve. She knew she had to act and fast. Early the following morning, May made her way to the closest military administrative office in town, a squat, bureaucratic building lined with faded flags and flickering fluorescent light. She stepped into the lobby, the cheap tile floor cold beneath her feet, and approached the front desk where a tired-looking clerk barely glanced up from her computer. "I'm here to file a formal request for the release of a military working dog," May said, her voice steady despite the tremor she felt vibrating in her chest. The clerk raised an eyebrow, chewing on the end of a pen. "Duke," May said firmly, "partnered with Sergeant Adam Thompson, now deceased." The clerk tapped a few keys, frowning at her screen. "Hold on," she muttered, picking up a phone and whispering into it for a few moments. Then she nodded toward a set of heavy double doors. "Down the hall. Major Wexler will see you." May nodded, clutching her purse tighter, and pushed through the doors. The office at the end of the hallway was oppressively neat, every book and plaque precisely aligned. Behind the massive oak desk sat Major Wexler, a man with a square jaw and cold, appraising eyes. He gestured curtly to the chair across from him. "Mrs. Thompson, I've been briefed on your concerns," he began, folding his hands neatly on the desk. "Allow me to be clear. Military working dogs, or MWDs, are classified as government property. They are not awarded to family members upon a handler's death unless decommissioned, and even then, only under specific circumstances. May's son's last wish was for me to bring Duke home. You have footage proving Duke is alive? You lied on his death certificate." Wexler's mouth twitched at the corner, a flicker of something annoyance, amusing, passing across his face before he smoothed it away. "Your personal feelings are understandable, Mrs. Thompson, but law is law. According to Military Code 1985A Section 14, all active K-9 units remain the property of the U.S. government, with no exceptions. Duke has been reassigned. His new orders are classified. I'm afraid there's nothing more we can do for you." May's hands clenched into fists in her lap. "He's not a thing you can just assign. He's family." Her voice cracked despite her efforts to control it. Wexler stood, signaling the meeting was over. "I suggest you accept the situation and move on, Mrs. Thompson. For your own sake." May rose, her body trembling, but not from fear, from rage. She turned sharply, marching out of the office without another word. They wanted her to give up, to accept their lies, but they underestimated her. She wasn't done, not even close. Later that afternoon, back at her kitchen table, May spread out every piece of evidence she had to flash drive: the file, her son's letter, desperately trying to formulate a plan. Legal jargon wasn't her thing. She needed help, someone who knew how to fight the system from within. But lawyers cost money, money she didn't have. As if summoned by her desperation, the phone rang. May hesitated, then picked it up. "Mrs. Thompson?" A deep, gravelly voice asked. "Who is this?" she demanded. "Name's Jack Delaney. I heard you might be needing legal representation. Free of charge." May's heart thudded painfully. "How did you get my number?" "Mutual acquaintance," Delaney said simply. "Let's just say your boy saved my hide overseas once upon a time. I owe him more than I can ever repay. You need someone who knows the Army's games? I'm your guy." May hesitated. Trust didn't come easily anymore, but something about the way he spoke, the grim certainty, the rawness beneath the gruff tone, told her he was telling the truth. "Where can we meet?" she asked. "Coffee shop downtown, midnight. Less eyes," he said before hanging up without waiting for a reply. Midnight found May sitting at a booth in the back of a dingy diner, nursing a cup of burnt coffee. The door creaked open and a man in his late 40s walked in, wearing a battered leather jacket, his limp suggesting old battle wounds. He slid into the seat across from her without a word, his steely blue eyes locking onto hers. "Show me what you got," he said, voice low. May handed over the flash drive and the file. Delaney plugged the drive into a small laptop he pulled from his satchel, his eyes narrowing as the footage played. When it ended, he leaned back, exhaling slowly. "They're covering something up, all right. Big time," he muttered. "If they're willing to fake a canine's death, there's more dirt here than you realize." "Can we fight them?" May asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Delaney's lips curled into something between a smile and a grimace. "Oh, we can fight, but it ain't gonna be clean. They'll pull every dirty trick in the book. We'll need evidence, witnesses, public pressure, and guts." He closed the laptop with a snap, his eyes burning with a fierce light. "Lucky for you, Miss Thompson. I'm all out of clean fights these days." May nodded, a new surge of hope igniting in her chest. For the first time in days, she didn't feel entirely alone. They wanted to play games with laws and codes? Fine. She would bring the fight to them, with everything she had and with someone who knew their rules better than they did. Outside the diner, the night pressed in thick and heavy, but May barely felt the cold. She had allies now, she had a cause, had nothing left to lose. And somewhere, Duke was waiting. May and Delaney moved quickly after their first meeting, knowing time was against them. The longer Duke remained in military custody, the greater the risk that he would disappear forever, reassigned, experimented upon, or worse. Delaney filed urgent motions to subpoena Duke's deployment records, banking on a sympathetic judge or a procedural loophole, but every request was stonewalled by national security exemptions. Meanwhile, May dug deeper, scouring online forums, anonymous tips, even back channels whispered through other grieving military families. Pieces of the puzzle began to emerge, scattered and blood-stained. There were rumors about Project Ashfall, a covert initiative said to operate beyond any official oversight. Its alleged goal was chilling. Weaponized military dogs not just for patrols or bomb detection, but for autonomous assassinations. Programmed attacks under remote commands, with no human handler needed to pull the leash. May's stomach twisted as she read the chilling details. K9s stripped of their emotional bonds, conditioned with electric shocks and chemical inducements, trained to kill without hesitation, without loyalty. Duke wasn't being reassigned for routine duty, he was being remade into a monster. The more she uncovered, the colder the world around her felt. She couldn't help imagining Duke's gentle eyes hardened into something unrecognizable, his spirit crushed under the cruelty of unseen hands. The thought of her son's beloved companion twisted into an instrument of death was almost more than she could bear. Every night she lay awake, fear gnawing at her, until the early hours when exhaustion finally claimed her. It was during one of these restless nights, long past midnight, when the knock came. A soft tap at her door, deliberate and measured. Heart hammering, May peered through the peephole but saw no one, only the darkness and the whisper of wind rattling the porch swing. She opened the door cautiously, and there, resting on the mat, was a plain manila envelope, weighted with something inside. No return address, no markings. Just a single word scrawled in black marker. Watch. May's hands shook as she brought it inside, locking every bolt and deadlock behind her. She slid the envelope open and pulled out an unmarked flash drive and a small crumpled note. "They can't hide this. Not from you." Without hesitation, she plugged the drive into her laptop, her palms clammy against the keyboard. A single video file appeared, time-stamped just 3 days earlier. She clicked play, the screen filled with the dim interior of what looked like a steel training room, walls bare and unadorned, flickering fluorescent lights overhead casting sickly shadows. At the center of the frame, chained to a metal post by a thick collar, was Duke. May gasped, her hands flying to her eyes. Even battered and thin, she knew every line of his powerful frame, the proud slope of his shoulders, the intelligence still flickering in his pained gaze. But what chilled her blood was what they were doing to him. A figure in military fatigues stepped into view, face blurred by low resolution, holding a thick remote. He pressed a button, and Duke's body convulsed violently, his muscles locking, a strangled yelp escaping him before he crumpled to the floor. May screamed into the silence of her living room, clenching the armrests of her chair until her nails dug grooves into the wood. In the video, Duke struggled to his feet, dazed and shaking, only for the man to issue a sharp whistle. Another figure, this time wearing heavy padding, entered the room, carrying a practice dummy shaped like a human silhouette. Duke hesitated, ears pinned back, tail low, trembling violently. The trainer barked a command, sharp and guttural. When Duke didn't move fast enough, another jolt from the remote sent him sprawling with a high-pitched whine. Slowly, brokenly, Duke rose and latched onto the dummy with a ferocity that seemed more desperate than willing, gnashing and tearing until the trainer finally barked another command to stop. The session repeated, again and again, until May could hardly bear to watch, sobbing into her hands, her heart shattering with each tortured sound from the dog she had promised to save. Finally, the screen went black, replaced by a single line of text. Redacted. May sat frozen, the message seared into her brain. 10 days. They were preparing Duke for something final, something irreversible. If they succeeded, whatever was left of her son's DOS, his soul, his memories would be erased, replaced by cold, mechanical obedience. May gritted her teeth, fury coursing through her veins hotter than anything she had ever known. She wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her sweater, her sorrow crystallizing into resolve. They thought they could break him. They thought they could bury the truth. They were wrong. Somewhere inside that wounded, battered body, Duke was still fighting. She had seen it, in the way he hesitated, the way he trembled before obeying. He hadn't given up yet, and neither would she. Mad grabbed the flash drive and stuffed it into her coat pocket, grabbing her keys from the counter. She needed to find Delaney. They needed a new plan. Something bolder, something riskier. 10 days, that was all the time they had left. 10 days to bring him back or lose him forever. May found Delaney waiting at the back of a darkened parking lot, the glow from his cigarette the only light piercing the foggy night. She pulled up beside him, throwing the car into park with a jerk and shoving the flash drive into his hands before she even finished climbing out. "They're breaking him," she said, her voice raw from hours of crying that never quite emptied her of grief. "They're turning him into something else." Delaney didn't waste time with questions. He slid into the passenger seat, laptop balanced on his knees, and loaded the video. His jaw tightened as he watched, his fists clenching at each whimper and convulsion from Duke's battered form. When the screen went dark, he shut the laptop with a grim finality. "We need intel," he muttered, lighting another cigarette with a shaky hand. Real intel, not scraps, not rumors. Over the next few days, they worked like ghosts, slipping through the edges of the town's small military network, contacting old friends and burned-out sources who still owed Delaney favors. Most slammed doors in their faces, too afraid to speak, but one night a battered manila folder appeared beneath May's windshield wiper, sealed with a single piece of duct tape. Inside was a series of leaked internal reports from the Ashfall program, stamped with red security-level black seals and peppered with brutal clinical language. May's hands trembled as she read about Duke's behavioral resistance anomalies, the cold phrasing that described how he repeatedly refused to engage in target elimination exercises, even under extreme duress. The reports grew increasingly frustrated, each entry documenting how Duke balked at striking unarmed or submissive figures, especially when they resembled civilians. He disobeyed kill commands even when shocked. He refused to finish dummy targets designed to mimic wounded human combatants. He snarled at handlers who pushed too hard. May clutched the papers to her chest, tears spilling freely. He was still in there. Somewhere beneath the trauma and terror, Duke still remembered who he was, still clung to the training Adam had given him, the humanity they had built together. But then came the final page. A memo dated just 2 days ago. Proposition. Memory wipe and behavioral reset scheduled. Subject exhibits critical resistance due to residual imprint from prior handler. Witness, unauthorized incident during Operation Scorched River. Subject's continued existence poses operational risk. May froze, her heart hammering painfully against her ribs. Operation Scorched River. She didn't know what it meant, but instinctively she understood it was the key. Whatever had happened during that mission, Duke had seen something they needed buried. Something so damning they were willing to torture him, reprogram him, erase every shred of who he was, just to make sure it stayed secret. Delaney read over her shoulder, his face going pale beneath the brim of his worn ball cap. "Son of a bitch," he muttered. "No wonder they're desperate." He dug out his phone, fingers moving rapidly as he accessed one of the few databases he still had clearance to skim. Within minutes, he pulled up a fragment of classified intel. Operation Scorched River. Classified Joint Task Force mission, 6 months ago. Location: undisclosed desert region. Objective: interdiction of rogue private military contractors. Status: partial failure. Civilian casualties. May stared at the screen, nausea coiling in her stomach. "They killed civilians," she whispered. And Duke saw every lie they had fed her about honor and loyalty, shattered in her hands like glass. Delaney's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. "They wipe him, May, and it's over. He won't even know you, won't even know Adam. He'll just be a weapon, an empty shell." May pressed her fists against her temples, breathing hard, forcing herself to think past the despair. "How much time do we have?" Delaney checked the memo again. "You scheduled the wipe for 48 hours from now. Location unknown, probably a black site." May felt the walls closing in, the clock ticking louder with every heartbeat. 48 hours. 2 days to find a ghost facility, break in, and rescue a dog the world had already signed away as collateral damage. She straightened her spine, the old stubbornness burning bright behind her tired eyes. "We need a way in," she said. Delaney grunted approval. "I might know a guy. He used to run Black Site Logistics. If he's still breathing and not too deep in a bottle, we might have a shot." May nodded. She would do whatever it took. Break laws, burn bridges. It didn't matter. Because Duke wasn't just a dog, he was Adam's last promise. And she wasn't going to let the people who destroyed her son destroy his best friend too. Not while she still had breath in her body. As they started the engine and peeled into the night, May couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere, even now, Duke was still fighting, refusing to forget, refusing to surrender. The plan was reckless, stitched together with desperation and too little time, but it was the only one they had. Delaney's old contact, a retired quartermaster named Briggs who now lived in a rusted trailer by the rail yards, managed to pull strings deep enough to uncover the location of the black site, an abandoned Air Force testing facility 2 hours outside of town, camouflaged under fake agricultural permits. According to Briggs, security was light but vicious, mostly private contractors who answered to no badge and no conscience. May sat in the passenger seat of Delaney's battered pickup, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the baseball cap pulled low over her forehead. Dressed in dark clothes and carrying only what she could conceal in her jacket's small bolt cutters, a flashlight, a hastily copied map, she tried not to think about the enormity of what she was about to do. If they caught her, it wouldn't just be prison. It would be disappearance, quietly erased, a footnote no one would read. But when she closed her eyes, she saw Duke's broken body in that training room, the stubborn fire still flickering in his eyes, and she knew she had no choice. Delaney pulled off onto a dirt road hidden by scrub brush, killing the headlights. "I'll wait here," he said, voice gruff but steady. "You got 30 minutes before the next patrol sweeps the perimeter. After that, I can't help you." May nodded, gripping the bolt cutters until her knuckles turned white. "I'll find him," she said, more to herself than to Delaney. The chain-link fence loomed ahead, topped with coils of razor wire that shimmered under the pale sliver of moonlight. May kept low, her body aching from nerves, and snipped a small opening near the bottom of the fence just large enough to crawl through. Inside, the air smelled of dust and ozone, and the buildings hunched like silent sentinels in the gloom. She moved swiftly, hoving the shadows, every step rehearsed in her mind 1,000 times over the last 48 hours. According to Briggs's intel, Duke would be kept in one of the auxiliary hangars, a squat rectangular building marked Unit 12. May counted the hangars as she moved, each one identical and lifeless, until she reached the 12th. Her heart pounded as she tried the side door, finding it mercifully unlocked. Inside, the darkness swallowed her whole until her flashlight cut a weak beam through the gloom. The space was cold and clinical, rows of kennels lining the far wall, each one containing a form curled in sleep or pacing restlessly. She moved quickly, scanning each nameplate until she found it. Duke? Ash 17. May dropped to her knees in front of the cage, hands fumbling with the latch. Her flashlight caught his form, larger now, leaner, scars threading his sides but unmistakably him. Duke stirred, ears twitching, head lifting slowly. For one agonizing heartbeat, he stared at her blankly, the programmed obedience locking his body in place. May's voice broke into a trembling whisper. Duke, baby, it's me. It's Mama May. His ears twitched again, the faintest flicker of recognition flashing across his golden eyes. Somewhere deep inside the layers of shock and pain, the dog Adam had loved still existed. May reached through the bars, tears slipping free as she whispered, "Come home, boy, come home." A sharp alarm split the air, a motion sensor she hadn't seen, triggered by her movement. Footsteps thundered outside, shouted commands slicing through the night. May's heart slammed against her ribs, terror rising, but she kept her hands stretched through the cage, willing him to remember. For a terrible moment, Duke remained frozen. Then he moved. With a sudden, explosive surge, he hurled himself against the cage door, the latch snapping free under his weight. The contractors outside shouted louder now, the heavy boots of multiple men storming toward the hangar. Duke hesitated just a fraction of a second, instinct battling against conditioning. Then, with a ragged, broken whine, he bolted toward May, crashing into her chest with a force that knocked them both to the floor. May wrapped her arms around his massive frame, sobbing into his fur, feeling the rapid beat of his heart against hers. He remembered. He chose her. The hangar doors burst open and floodlights bathed the room in harsh white, silhouetting armed men pouring inside. May rose to her knees, shielding Duke with her body even as the soldiers raised their weapons, barked orders she couldn't hear over the roar of her own blood pounding in her ears. Duke growled low and deep, his body trembling not with fear but with readiness. He positioned himself between May and the attackers, hackles raised, teeth bared. They would not take him again, not without a fight. The contractors closed in, cautious but determined, shouting commands she couldn't understand. May knew they had no intention of letting either of them walk out of here. She had minutes, maybe seconds, to figure out how to survive. Her fingers brushed the cold metal flashlight at her hip, mind racing. The first shot cracked through the hangar, splintering a section of concrete just inches from where May crouched, shielding Duke. Instinct took over, and without thinking she grabbed the heavy flashlight at her hip and hurled it at the nearest floodlight, shattering the bulb in a burst of glass and sparks. Darkness cloaked them, and for a precious second, the confusion gave them cover. She whispered fiercely to Duke, pushing him toward the shadows, her own feet already pounding against the slick floor. Shouts erupted behind them, orders barked into radios, boots hammering the ground in pursuit. May ducked low, weaving between stacked crates and abandoned machinery, her lungs burning with each ragged breath. Duke stayed glued to her side, his powerful body tense and ready, a living shield against the chaos. They burst out through a side door, stumbling into the night. Sirens blared to life, slicing through the quiet, and floodlights roved wildly across the compound. Delaney's truck was nowhere in sight. He must have had a bail when the alarm sounded. But May didn't have time to panic. She sprinted toward the outer fence, heart hammering in terror, Duke keeping pace with her, his ears flat against his skull. A distant hum grew louder, the unmistakable sound of a helicopter blades chopping the air, sweeping over the compound. They would have no chance if they didn't move faster. She spotted a maintenance gate ahead, half rusted and swaying slightly in the breeze. Hope surged. If they could reach it before the chopper spotted them, they might still get out. They were 20 feet away when the first burst of automatic fire ripped into the ground at their feet, showering them with dirt and sparks. May stumbled, cried out, but Duke nudged her back to her feet with a firm shove of his massive head. They reached the gate and together forced it open, squeezing through just as another round of bullets tore into the metal behind them. They didn't stop running. May didn't know how long they ran. Time dissolved into a blur of pain and adrenaline. But finally, when the lights and shouts had faded into the distance, They collapsed behind a stand of trees near an abandoned service road. May crumpled to the ground, chest heaving, her body trembling with exhaustion. Duke circled her protectively, ears twitching at every distant sound. Somewhere deep in the darkness, May heard engines roaring back to life, helicopters lifting off, the organized chaos of a full-scale manhunt spinning into motion. They weren't safe, not even close. The black site wasn't going to let them go. They wanted Duke back, or failing that, they wanted him erased. She realized it fully when Delaney finally found her at dawn, pulling up in an old battered sedan instead of his pickup, waving her inside with urgency. "Put out an order," he said grimly as they sped away. "Immediate neutralization. Duke's officially classified as an active security threat. They're authorized to kill on sight." May stared at him in horror, the words barely registering. Kill on sight. Her hands trembled in her lap, but she forced herself to stay calm, to think. They needed a plan. They needed help. Not just Delaney and Briggs and whispered favors. Real help. "There's a network," Delaney said after a long moment. "Old war buddies of Adams. Guys he saved, fought with. Scattered now, some legit, some not so much, but if they knew what was happening..." His voice trailed off meaningfully. May caught the glimmer of hope buried in his words. Soldiers Adam had trusted. Men who still carried the debt of loyalty unpaid. That night, in a crumbling warehouse on the outskirts of town, they gathered. 5 men, all bearing the scars of battles fought on foreign soil, faces weathered by loss and betrayal. Briggs was there, of course, along with a wiry man named Vega who spoke little, but whose eyes missed nothing. A broad-shouldered giant called Riker who still wore his old combat boots. A quiet sniper named Holloway, who kept nervously checking the shadows. And a grizzled medic called Tex, who kept clenching and unclenching his fists. When Delaney finished explaining, a heavy silence filled the room. Finally, Riker leaned forward, his voice rough. "You're saying they're trying to turn Duke into some kind of damn assassin dog, and now they want him dead because he saw too much?" May nodded, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. "My son trusted him," she said quietly. "He saved Adam's life more times than I can count. Now it's our turn." Riker slammed a fist into his palm. "Then screw him. We owe Adam, we owe that dog." One by one, the others nodded. Holloway pulled out a battered laptop and started hacking into local grid maps. Tex spread a hand-drawn layout of the black site's perimeter on a rickety table. Vega checked weapons, cleaned silently with efficient motions. Briggs passed out radios and outdated security badges that still might buy them a few precious minutes inside. A plan began to form. Rough and dangerous and half-mad, but it was better than nothing. They would go back. Not with guns blazing, not yet, but with precision, with stealth, with the kind of dirty tricks the military had taught them and then pretended to forget. They would get Duke out. May sat against the wall. For the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself a sliver of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. It took everything May had left to sit upright in the cold wooden bench of the courtroom, her hands clenched tightly in her lap as the bailiff called the room to order. The stale air smelled faintly of old carpet and nerves. She could feel Duke's steady presence at her side, his warm body pressed against her leg beneath the defense table where Delaney sat rigid, reviewing his notes for the 100th time. Across the aisle, the government's attorneys whispered among themselves, flanked by 2 grim-faced military officers in full-dress uniform. The judge, a stern woman named Harris with silver hair and hawk-like eyes. "Opening arguments have concluded," she said. Delaney rose, voice steady, every inch the seasoned litigator he once was before war and grief had stripped away whatever softness he used to carry. "Your Honor, we intend to demonstrate that my client, Mrs. May Thompson, is not attempting to reclaim government property for sentimental reasons, but rather to expose a pattern of misconduct, unlawful experimentation, and subsequent cover-up by military personnel involving a K-9 unit named Duke, Code Ash-17, who remains a living witness to those events." He clicked a button on the small remote in his hand and the large monitor behind the judge flickered to life. May's heart hammered in her chest as the footage played the same footage Delaney had smuggled out, enhanced and clarified. The courtroom watched in stunned silence as images rolled by. The chaotic battlefield, the explosion, Adam's fall. Then Duke charging forward, ignoring gunfire to reach fallen civilians trapped behind enemy lines, leading women and children to safety, shielding them with his own body, defying that had ordered a full tactical sweep without regard for non-combatants. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Even the judge's eyes narrowed as she leaned forward slightly, focusing hard on the screen. Delaney let the images speak for themselves for a long, heavy moment before clicking the video off. "Your Honor," he said, voice cutting through the stunned silence. "This evidence establishes that the K-9 known as Duke disobeyed an illegal order to facilitate the rescue of innocent civilians, saving at least 17 lives at great personal risk. In retaliation, the military not only falsified his death record, but subjected him to experimental conditioning intended to erase his memories, an attempt to silence a living witness to their misconduct." A low murmur spread through the courtroom, the government attorneys scrambling to object, but Judge Harris silenced them with a sharp gesture. "Proceed," she said coolly. Delaney nodded to May, who rose with difficulty, stepping into the witness box, Duke at her heel. She answered every question with quiet determination, detailing the lies, the cover-ups, the desperate flight to save Duke's life. The prosecutor tried to paint her as an emotional mother unable to see reason, but May's steady, unwavering testimony cut through their narrative like a blade. She wasn't there for sentiment. She was there for truth. As the morning bled into afternoon, Delaney called his next witness, someone whose name was not on any pre-submitted list. The bailiff opened the double doors, and a collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. A man entered, gaunt but upright, with a limp that spoke of old injuries and a haunted look in his eyes. His uniform hung loose on his frame, and scars marred one side of his face. Whispers broke out instantly. "Is that? But he's dead. They said he died in the blast." "State your name for the record," Delaney prompted. "Staff Sergeant Noah Pierce," the man said, voice gravelly but firm. May's mouth dropped open. Pierce had been Adams' second-in-command, listed as KIA during Operation Scorched River. His death had been part of the official report, unquestioned, accepted. Until now, Staff Sergeant Delaney continued, his voice low, respectful. "Can you tell the court what you witnessed during Operation Scorched River?" Pierce's hands tightened into fists against the railing. "I saw civilians caught in the crossfire," he said, his voice trembling with anger. "I saw command orders to eliminate all witnesses, combatants or not. Adam refused. He and Duke broke ranks to get those people out." He drew a ragged breath, "and when the mission went sideways, they tried to bury it, ordered us to keep silent or disappear. I faked my death to escape." Gasps rippled again through the courtroom. The judge rapped her gavel for order, but even she looked shaken. "And Duke?" Delaney pressed. "Duke saw everything," Pierce said, locking eyes with the judge. "He's not just a dog. He's the last piece of living evidence they couldn't destroy, so they decided to break him instead." Delaney rested his hands lightly on the table, letting the weight of Pierce's words sink into the room. No one spoke for a long moment. Finally, the judge cleared her throat, her voice rougher than before. "I am ordering an immediate suspension of any military control over the animal known as Duke, pending full investigation," she said. "Furthermore, this court will review whether criminal charges are warranted based on the evidence presented." Relief crashed over May so hard she thought she might faint. She dropped to her knees beside Duke, pressing her forehead to his cheeks. He licked her face once, a soft, almost questioning gesture, and she laughed through her tears, clinging to him. But even as the courtroom erupted into chaos, reporters shouting questions, attorneys scrambling, soldiers glaring, May knew it wasn't over. Not yet. They had won a battle, but the war was still waiting, outside those courtroom doors, in the shadows of power that refused to let go so easily. The tension inside the courtroom crackled like a live wire as Judge Harris returned to the bench, her face carved from stone, the murmurs of the crowded gallery dying into a breathless silence. May sat rigid, one hand buried deep in Duke's thick fur, the other clenched so tightly her nails dug into her palms. Delaney leaned forward slightly, his eyes locked onto the judge, every muscle in his body taut with anticipation. As careful consideration of the evidence presented, Judge Harris began, her voice steady but weighted with significance. "This court finds that the entity known as ASH-17, call sign Duke, is not merely government property, but a sentient being whose actions demonstrated independent moral judgment in the face of unlawful orders. As such, he is entitled to protection from further experimentation, reprogramming, or destruction. A gasp escaped May's lips before she could stop it, tears springing to her eyes. The judge continued, "Effective immediately, Duke is hereby released from all military obligations and is remanded to the custody of Mrs. May Thompson." A beat of stunned silence filled the room, broken only by the scrape of chairs and muffled sobs from those scattered in the gallery who had come to support her. Delaney allowed himself a tight nod, the barest flicker of a smile ghosting his lips. May squeezed Duke closer, feeling the slow, steady thump of his heart against her side, a living testament to everything she had fought for. But just as the wave of relief began to crash over her, the lead government attorney stood sharply, his voice slicing through the moment. "Your Honor, the Department of Defense intends to file an immediate appeal. We request a stay of execution on the order pending review by a higher court." The words slammed into May's gut like a physical blow. She turned pleading eyes toward Judge Harris, but the judge's expression remained inscrutable. After a long, heavy pause, she spoke, "You may file your appeal, Counselor, but this court's order stands pending further adjudication. The dog walks free today." The gallery erupted into chaos, shouts, cheers, angry curses from military personnel hissing beneath their breath. But May heard none of it. She only heard the word, today. Today Duke was free. Today they had won. Maybe tomorrow would bring new battles, new obstacles, but for now, for this moment, they had reclaimed something no appeal could erase. A bailiff motioned them forward, and May rose shakily to her feet, Duke moving instinctively with her. Cho kept her chin high, shoulders squared as they walked together down the aisle, the crowd parting before them like a tide split by a force far greater than fear. Cameras flashed outside the courthouse steps, reporters shouting questions she had no intention of answering. The gray sky hung low, swollen with unshed rain, the first fat drops spattering the concrete as May pushed through the crowd, her hand never leaving Duke's collar. The drizzle turned to a steady rain as she descended the final steps. Duke pressed close to her side. It slicked her hair against her forehead, soaked through her jacket, blurred the world into shimmering gray. She didn't care. She welcomed it. The cold, the wet, the sting against her skin, it felt real in a way nothing had for months. At the bottom of the stairs, she paused, lifting her face to the sky, letting the rain wash away the courtroom, the fear, the bitterness. Duke shook himself beside her, sending droplets flying, and for the first time since Adam's death, May laughed a raw, broken sound that bubbled up from someplace deep and battered inside her. She knelt beside Duke, cupping his scarred face in both hands, forcing him to meet her gaze. His eyes, golden and clear despite everything they had done to him, held hers without wavering. "We did it, boy," she whispered, her voice cracking with the enormity of it all. "You brought you home." Duke nuzzled her gently, and she pressed her forehead to his, closing her eyes against the tears that threatened to spill again. She didn't notice the reporters inching closer, the umbrellas opening like flowers in the crowd. None of it mattered. She rose slowly, wiping her face with the street of her soaked jacket, and as she turned toward the street, she bent low to whisper in Duke's ear. Her voice steadied despite the storm breaking around them. "You didn't just win your freedom," she said. "We won Adam's soul back too." Duke whined softly, leaning into her side, and together they stepped into the rain. Two battered survivors, walking forward into a future no longer stolen from them. Behind them, the courthouse loomed, and beyond it, the endless battles yet to come. But for now, they had this moment, raw and true, a silent promise between a mother, a fallen son, and a dog who refused to forget. If this story touched something deep inside you, don't forget to like and subscribe to stay with us for more powerful journeys like this one. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What moment in May and Duke's fight for freedom moved you the most? Where in the world are you watching from today? Share your feelings in the comments. I'll be there, reading every word.